Okay, welcome, Margaret, to the Tech Ketchup Show, a Nerd for Tech Originals, and I hope you enjoy this conversation today. So we'll start by letting you speak about yourself and about your work and what you do at NASA. So you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kushagra. I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation, and I'm happy to be able to talk to you and share a little bit about what I do. So I am an optical engineer, and I work at one of the NASA centers called NASA Goddard. We have more than 10 different NASA centers throughout the US, and we all sort of have different focuses. So some of the centers are called research centers, some of the centers are called flight centers, and that means that each center sort of focuses on a specific area, maybe more fundamental research, maybe building a specific type of flight instruments. And that's what we do at NASA Goddard, the location where I work, which is in Greenbelt, Maryland. We're a center that's about 10,000 people in one center. So we're actually one of the largest NASA centers that are, like I mentioned, distributed in different states all over the US. But of course, NASA is really big, right? So we actually collaborate very heavily with a lot of our sister organizations outside of the country. And we, of course, collaborate internally with a lot of universities and a lot of different research centers, because the type of work that we do is very complicated. So we need to be able to create partnerships with lots of experts out there to be able to make them work. And currently I'm working on the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which we are currently planning on launching in 2025. And the launch dates of these big telescopes can sometimes change, but right now that's what we're aiming for. This is an astronomical telescope, and it's going to be sent 1.5 million kilometers away from the Earth. And it's going to be, going around the sun, just like, our planet, and it's going to be looking for exoplanets. So planets similar potentially to our planet that could potentially harbor life like the one that we find in our planet. It's going to be studying dark energy. It's going to be taking spectroscopic measurements. It's going to be imaging. It's going to be asking some fundamental astronomy questions. One of the really cool things of this telescope that I'm working on is that part of the observing time, we call it, where it's going to be, taking pictures and doing measurements out in space, we are going to allocate to the community. So universities, whether they're from inside or outside the country, can write a proposal of something that they would want the telescope to image, is something that they'd want the telescope to study. And the proposals are going to be evaluated. And then, you could be just a household and your family just is really excited about something, and you guys write the proposal as a family. And, of course, it's going to be a very competitive process, but you could be selected so that the telescope specifically tries to answer a question or specifically tries to do something so that it creates this enrichment of the community. So it's really like a telescope that belongs to all of us, where we can all learn about it. Certainly everything we learn from this telescope will be shared, to the public. That's what we do at NASA. We really like to share everything that we do and just let everybody know, because it's really exciting, right? So we want to talk about it, but to take it a step further, and we can involve the community, where the community tells us, what we want the telescope to be observing. I think it's especially cool.
Great. So when we actually reached out to your profile, for the first time, we kind of saw an optical engineer kind of profile. We haven't encountered such type of profile in our lives as yet. So what is the work of an optical engineer, and how do you define an optical engineer as a profession? So could you just explain that?
It's a great question, because I didn't know. I'm an optical engineer now, and I was studying physics as a physics undergraduate student. I didn't know that you could be an optical engineer. So I think that, so I'm actually always talking about, what is optics and what are optical engineers, because I know that people don't know about this, right? Because the community of us, there are thousands of us, but we're thousands in the whole world, right? So there's not that many of us out there. I went a few years ago to a conference in Mexico. And, there was probably hundreds of people at the conference. And then a few months later, I went to the conference, to another optics conference in Germany. The same people that were in Mexico were in Germany because there's only so many of us, right? So optics is a part of physics that studies light and the interaction of light with everything around it. As optical engineers, we understand how light behaves. So if we can understand it, we can manipulate it. And optics interact with everything around us. They interact with our eyes, light refracts. They interact with mirrors, so light reflects. They interact with diffractive gratings, so light diffracts. It goes through different polarization states. We talk about polarization. The rainbow is an optical phenomenon. So everything that has to do with light is an optical phenomena, which means there's really optics happening all around us, right? We have two wonderful optical systems that are attached to our body that just happen naturally in nature, right? So optics, since we understand light, we can manipulate it. And a perfect example of manipulating light is a telescope. With a telescope, we can manipulate the light that is collected in a telescope so that we can very carefully, send it to where we want it, so we can really understand the information that light has. We could be looking at a galaxy, and the galaxy is going to emit different components of the spectrum. So visible light that we can see, infrared light that we don't have the capability to see, ultraviolet radiation that we don't have the capability to see. We know this radiation exists. We know that there are detectors that are able to see this type of radiation, but our awesome optical system has certain capabilities. So many systems have capabilities. So the best thing that we can do is to complement those different capabilities. Actually, when we send telescopes out into space, we want telescopes that operate at these different regions of the spectrum so that we can get a full picture. So it's really cool because I'm actually married to another optical engineer, and he's a designer and I'm the builder. So we always talk about, so he talks about things like, I'm going to design this really complicated telescope. And I'm like, who's going to build that? You need to make something that we can build. And he's like, that's your problem. I get to decide something really crazy and you get to decide how to build it. So those are the type of things that we're coming up with. Designers that come up with some really wacky, sort of really new ideas, and then we get some pushback from the people that are building, and we're like, okay, maybe we can do a little bit of that crazy, but not too much. And we've really enhanced our capability because of that.
Great. Like, ma'am, you did your you are from Mexico and then moving to USA for doing your PhD. So was it something specific that drove you out of your country for doing your PhD in USA, or was it just for the educational purpose? If you could tell us.
That's an excellent question. So in Mexico, and I don't know what the stats are in India, so you might be able to educate me on that. But in Mexico, only about 4 to 5% of the population go to college. It is extremely rare for people to go to college. It's a huge highlight. If you graduate high school, that's really, really big. So it's very rare that you even make it to college. So when I studied my undergraduate degree in physics before I even know that this optical engineering thing was a thing. And there were opportunities in Mexico, but I knew that if I left the country, I would have other doors open. And I was really lucky that I applied to University of Arizona, which has a very good optical engineering program, and they accepted me and they gave me a fellowship. Without the fellowship, I wouldn't have been able to be able to afford to be coming from Mexico and earning in pesos. I wouldn't have been able to make it in the US spending in dollars. So I just knew that there was an appeal. The program from the University of Arizona was one of the top 10 optics programs in the world. So I knew that it was going to be a very competitive process, but if I made it, and I was able to graduate from a program in optical sciences from Arizona, I was going to have opportunity. So it was sort of a trade-off that I said, I'll pursue this. And thankfully, with a lot of work and sweat and tears, it worked out, and here I am.
Oh. So ma'am, when you were back in Mexico and still you were figuring out things, what to do in as what to take up as a profession and all. Was this thought of working at NASA or an organization of such an elite position? Was that thought of working at NASA in your mind at some point of time?
No, never, right? I grew up in a pig farm in Tecamachalco, Puebla. That's the name of the city where my parents still live. I tried to visit them about twice a year. They come to visit here too.
Yeah.
Never, did I think NASA was not, and if you live in the US, NASA is a place you can visit, right? You can go to sort of the museum, you can see the shuttle, the space shuttle. You can see, an astronaut suit, things like that. In Mexico, that's not something that you see. In Mexico, we don't even have science fairs. Things like now every year I judge a science fair. That's not something that exists there. So it was very different. The only place I ever saw or heard NASA was on a screen, right? In a movie somewhere, if you had satellite and you were able to get, more than your local channels, that's where you were able to see NASA. Never did I think that I would be here. It's sort of like a dream that I didn't know I have, right? Because, right, I love it and I think it's really cool and the stuff that we're doing is awesome. It's complicated, right? Some days I'm like hitting my head against the wall because some of the problems we're trying to solve are really hard and we don't know how to solve them yet. But it wasn't something that I saw. I got here through sort of these intermediate opportunities that came about that eventually led me here.
Great. So, like, kind of when you were for the first time accepted at NASA, and I think you were as an intern out there at NASA. So, when you were accepted at NASA, what was that feeling about? Like, obviously, it's something which you haven't dreamt of, but you eventually got to, and which was so exciting as an opportunity, and also as a profession, it is something which will obviously lead you to much professional growth and growth as an individual also. So how was that feeling of getting into NASA when you actually got an intern offer from it?
It was awesome, but it was also scary. So I remember at that point I was living in Mexico. I was studying my undergraduate degrees, physics degree. My parents only lived an hour away from where I grew up in Tecamachalco. My university was only about an hour away. So I saw my parents all the time. And moving, that meant I had to move to the US and work here, which I had never lived in the US. I didn't know anybody in Maryland. I didn't have any friends and I just left. So it's really scary when you sort of leave everything all the people that and you kind of just take the risk. And I think that's what we all have to do. We all take risks, whether they're little or small, and that's the way we grow. And that was definitely a really big growing opportunity for myself. So I was really nervous, but I was really excited. And one of the things that I did when I was there is I was working all the time. I would come in really early and I would leave really late because I was like, this is like, I don't know, I know the internship starts and ends in 10 weeks. I don't know if I'm ever coming back. So I'm here now. I'm going to make the most of this. And I was there all the time. And that was actually a really good thing because my colleagues saw how much I worked really hard. So probably about week 6, week 7 out of this 10-week long summer internship, there was an opening that came up. And at that point, it was called Co-op. Now it's called Pathways, which is a more formal internship that allows you to still, as a student, apply to it, but that it allows you, once you graduate from your degree, you can convert to full-time employment. So sort of a pathway to full-time employment. And it was very competitive because summer internships, start and end, but this is a formal internship that converts into something else. So it's awesome. You're going to school, you're getting to work at the same time. You're paid whenever you work, and then you finish and you sort of have a job. It's like, So when I was there was an opening that came about, and one of my colleagues said, Margaret, you should apply. I think you would be great. So it was, I think he saw my passion, he saw my excitement, he saw my commitment. I was there all the time. And I didn't know a lot of things. I remember I would just ask a lot of questions that I think some people were like, maybe she should know this. But I think that sort of put me out there that I really wanted to learn. I didn't know a lot of things, but I really wanted to learn. And that's still the case today. I still have to be learning a lot all the time, but
Yeah.
it was a great opportunity. I loved it. And it is now 13 years ago that I've been here for that long.
Yeah. So like now it's been a long time since you have been associated with NASA, and it's a known fact that some of the most brilliant brains work at NASA. So now the point is like, are there any kind of overwhelming moments for you at this point also, when you feel like there are so many brains which are at some point of time there is this feeling of superior complexity which might come to your mind, that there are so many brilliant brains working at NASA, and the kind of doubts or queries or questions that I'm having might be too trivial to ask or discuss about. uh, is this kind of mindset still with you, or now it's like, because the kind of environment is very competitive, so it might also be the reverse way. The question that I'm asking, that could be kind of a reverse way where all the people are having a good interaction and they actually don't judge you on the kind of questions you ask. But it can be both ways, so I just want to get to the exact point what it is like.
Of course, the answer is not straightforward, right? Because it depends. And like I said, NASA's really big. So there's all kinds of people there, right? Different personalities. I have to say, for the most part, people are really nice. And we just really like to do the work that we're doing. So because we love what we do, I think that feeling, there's a general feeling that we all have that we want to share it. And I think the vast majority of the time, we are all willing to answer these questions because, every year we also have summer interns that are coming on site and they have a whole bunch of questions, and they don't have optics backgrounds. So they have a lot of optics fundamental questions. So that's also good, right? Because it also keeps me on my toes. I have to make sure I know all my basics so that I can answer some of these basic questions that are important, right? If you don't know your basics, then that's a really big problem. I think the vast majority of the time, people are very open and willing to answer and willing to teach. I do think, however, that the feeling, there's a syndrome that's called the imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
That says, that we always feel like we don't belong. I feel like we all sort of get a little bit of that all the time. And of course, there are times I work with many colleagues that are older than me, that are 30 years older than me. And, they have so much experience. And I will be, of course, very, very happy. There's a few times maybe this has happened and I'll catch them make a mistake. And I'll say, oh, I caught this. And they're like, Margaret, you caught my mistake. And of course, that makes my day. I'm like, I really did something awesome today. I caught his mistake. We're all human, right? And those are just like little victories. But I think that just comes to show, we're all learning all the time. And I think the vast majority of the time, most of the people are just happy to make sure that we're all learning together. So we're willing to answer questions.
Yeah, great. Also, ma'am, if you could tell us if that allows to you, that some of the projects that you have been associated with and the kind of work that you have done over those projects, if you could tell us.
Sure. So a lot of the work that we do, I actually don't know of any work that we do that we can't talk about. There are
Okay.
some things that we can't talk about yet, like that we're waiting to publish, just like anybody. And if we're waiting to publish something, you don't want to be discussing it.
Yeah.
Somebody else will get that idea. So, but really everything we do, we're allowed to talk about. because we really just want to share with everybody.
Mm.
And we're a federally funded agency,
Yeah.
so all of the dollars that come into the agency are for the public and to generate just generate knowledge and share that with everybody. So I've been really fortunate to be able to work on the Hubble Space Telescope, which of
Wow.
course is a very exciting, telescope.
Yeah.
I think everybody knows of Hubble, right? Like Hubble has been out there almost all of my life. Is a 30-plus-year-old telescope. It's been orbiting the planet. I started working at Goddard while we were doing one of its servicing missions. The reason why it's such an old telescope is because we've been able to service it multiple times and
Mm.
sort of like replace these old pieces of instruments and electronics that eventually fail, right? All of our cell phones eventually fail. So it's normal that instruments eventually fail. So we've been able to go and replace them and enhance the lifetime of a telescope. And it's Hubble. Like, come on, this is an awesome telescope. So I've been able to study some of the samples that are on it. So in order for us to understand how the systems are affected by being in space, what we did as part of the servicing efforts is that we had astronauts collect some samples that were left on the telescope, and then we were able to study them when they brought them back. So it was part of the effort that studied these samples when they came back. So that was really cool. We were able to study what type of contamination and particulates were deposited on them through time. I've been also fortunate enough to work on the James Webb Space Telescope, which we're very excited is going to launch later this year in October. We've all sort of, if you're into astronomy, you know about the James Webb Space Telescope. So this is going to be a really big telescope. We've never sent anything to space this big, this cold, this far away. It's going to be launched in October from the French Guiana in South America. And it's going to go, really far away into space, like I said before, 1.5 million kilometers away from our planet, and is just going to be looking at space like we never have before. So it's really exciting. I was able to be one of the people that was working on building the housing that holds the instrument. It has 4 different instruments on the telescope. I was able to work on that. And right now I'm working on the Nancy Roman Grace Telescope. They come up with these really long names. For short, we call it Roman. So I'm working on Roman right now. We're scheduled to launch in the mid-20s.
Okay.
So in this decade. And it's going to be the successor to James Webb in the sense that it's going to continue to focus on astronomy objectives, because we have sort of different science objectives. This one will focus on it as well. It'll be the same size of Hubble, but Hubble is really close to our planet. James Webb is going to be far away. Roman is going to be far away, very close to James Webb. So they will sort of both, James Webb and Roman together will be orbiting our planet, our solar system.
Great. So I'm like, you pursued your bachelor's in physics, and then you kind of moved on to optical engineering and that kind of work. So first of all, how and why physics happened? Because it's definitely quite an interesting field to discover and to learn about. So why was your interest driven into the subject? And then if it wasn't for optical engineering, then what was some of the different fields coming out from physics that you could have pursued as your career?
So many, right? There's so many things that can come out of physics. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to be able to pick something. So I always really like math. And everywhere I go and I talk about this, there's always at least one math lover out there, right? There's always some of us that always liked math. Math was always fun. I just always had this passion for it. And I had good math teachers. And I think that really is key also. If you have a teacher that really loves what they teach, you sort of feel that passion as they're teaching it, right? And the things just come, you can learn them much easier, I think. So I loved it. I had good math teachers. And when it came to the point where I wanted to decide what to study, I knew it had to be something in STEM and science, technology, engineering, and math. It had to be some STEM related field because I was just always curious. My mom loves to tell a story how she would ask me when I was a teenager to wash dishes. go wash the dishes after dinner. And she said I was really inefficient because I would love to watch how the drops of water from the leaky faucet would fall on the plate and you'd see the ripples propagate.
Yeah.
Such a simple thing that happens all the time. But I would stare at it, which of course would bother her because she wanted me to finish washing the dishes. But that was something that I was doing that I wasn't noticing. I was just a simple thing that I would just try to understand. And I remember going dancing one night when I was a teenager to this nightclub, and you could see the lights, going off. And I remember I was sitting down and I took a napkin and I started to write some equations, trying to model what I was seeing. I don't know what I was doing. I know for a fact, but I felt that could happen, that I could do it and like it can happen. And that led me to believe, I have a passion for this. I'm always trying to question and understand it. But more importantly than anything, I was really only able to go into a degree like physics because my parents were very supportive. Physics is a very rare field for females. Only about 5% of the physics community are females. In Mexico, those percentages are much, much lower. So it was only because my parents, sort of believed that I could do this, that they didn't get in the way, and they encouraged me, you'll be able to pursue this and carry on and do that. So the passion and the support made it all possible.
Great. It was a nice interaction to you, ma'am, and I would like to end this podcast on this note only. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
It's great, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.